So Nick Cannon got fired from Viacom for saying some anti-Semitic remarks. One of the things that he said was that black people are the true Hebrews, which I agree with. He said some other stuff, but I want to focus on that because there's a lot of misinformation about black people's history. You know, our oppressors are telling us about our history and they're repeating it over and over and over again. And whenever they say anything about our history, it's basically we didn't do anything in history besides slavery. And if anything amazing is in Africa, oh, other people did it, right? It's always that. That's the game that they play. But there's over 400 Black Madonnas throughout Europe. I don't think there's quite a few people that don't even know this. There's over 400 Black Madonnas throughout Europe, right? And there's old paintings of black priests, black people in castles, black people as knights, black people as nobility. So we were there, but notice they don't like talking about it, right? They don't like talking about it. And why is that? And usually when they don't like talking about something, it's because they did something nasty to us and they just don't want to talk about it. And they did something really, really nasty to us in Europe. But first of all, I want to talk about the Black Madonna. Like, the reason why it's black is because black people painted it black, because black people were there. Now they're going to say that, oh no, it's the soot from the candle over centuries that made it black. Like, really? Like, the Madonna is the central figure of the Catholic Church. I don't know about you, but if something's sacred to me, I'm not going to allow it to get dirty over centuries. And it's funny how the face and the hands get dirty, right? Everything else, you know, it's fine, but the face and the hands get dirty. That's interesting, isn't it? So we were there, and notice that even now, people talk about how black people are forgiving. Why are black people forgiving? And with all the stuff that we went through, why are we so forgiving? Because it's our Catholic nature. It's our Catholic nature. It's not their nature. It's a Catholic nature. Because if you really understand the history, the Protestant Reformation was a New World Order. You see, we're moving into a New World Order now, you know, where we're trying to realize that people coming together, people working together, that's the best thing. We had no problems with Caucasians. We wanted to work with them and then, you know, develop together. But the thing is that they were like, no. They just didn't like what we were about. And then they backstabbed us and took over. That's what they did. Because the 1300s, it was the worst century ever for black rule throughout Europe. It was the worst century ever. Things were just going wrong. There was like a climate change. And then all of a sudden wars, you know, the four horsemen of apocalypse happened. Okay, and then of course there was the Black Death. Now, the Black Death was not only the disease. These Christians, in history, you hear them talk about Christians slaughtering a whole bunch of Jews all throughout Europe. Well, those Jews were actually black people. Because you have to ask yourself, well, black people were there. What happened to all the black people? You know, what happened to a good chunk of the black people? They didn't kill all of us, but they devastated us. They killed a huge amount of us in Europe, and they took our power, they took our castles, they took our property, they took our books. And when they took our books, you know, then that's when they started revamping history and started changing history and says, Protestant Reformation, you know, new beginning. It was a New World Order. The Protestant Reformation was clearly a New World Order. And then after that, they started, you know, ruling, because they had all our information. And whenever they say anything about our history, we didn't do anything in history. You know, we were just slaves, you know. And they have all this history back in the day, supposedly, because it's fabricated. They were there, but they weren't dominant. Okay, but they were there. Okay, but then somehow they have all these civilizations back in the day. They come to the future and they can't act civilized. We are the ones that are civilizing them. You understand? Even though we're in an inferior position, we're civilizing them. Don't you find that weird? So there's something wrong. And they don't even tell you why they have an attitude towards black people. Like, where did it come from? Like, where did this attitude? Supposedly, you went to Africa to get inferior people, supposedly, according to them, inferior people that you don't like to come work for you. When your own people needed work, you were getting black people. So something, even their narrative about slavery just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And if you really understand slavery, these people hated it. It hated that system because it was a disciplined and organized system. Like, for example, did you know that if Black Wall Street was a slave community, all those Caucasians would have been rounded up and executed? Because they destroyed a massive amount of property. Slaves were property, right? Even if they just destroyed a whole bunch of slaves, you know, they didn't touch the plantation, they just killed a whole bunch of slaves, they still would have been rounded up and executed because you destroyed a lot of property. But in the free system, no, you could get away with that because it's their system, right? So they could get away with that. They could get away with killing black people. They could get away with destroying black property. It's not a big deal. So you think a slave could go to the market, all of a sudden get lynched, and nothing's going to happen to them? Of course, the plantation owner is going to come and investigate what happened. He's going to get the authorities to investigate, and he's going to interrogate all those people in lynch mob photos to find out who did this and make sure it never happens again. So when the slave goes to the market, he or she is not molested at all. You understand? It'll be a totally different story when it comes to black people's safety. But they are telling the story about slavery. Slavery did have its problems, but they're misrepresenting it. You see, so there's a lot of lies that they're telling, and if they tell the truth about black people being the true Hebrews, we're gonna have to like question everything they say about their history, because a good chunk of it is full of lies and misinformation. They have some truth there, but we were there, we were in Europe, and they try to push us out and say that we weren't. But as I said, they got their New World Order. When you get your New World Order, you could say whatever you want to say. You have the gate. You're the gatekeeper. You have the keys. You know, you could say whatever you want to say. Black people are inferior. Black people are uncivilized and had no significant history to speak of. You know that they were saying that in the North during the time of slavery. So if they have a problem with slavery, you know, you believe whatever they say about slavery, then you must believe what they say about black people having no history, no inferior and uncivilized. Even though they were being ignorant towards us, that's a sign of inferiority from them. And then they're attacking us, that's uncivilized behavior. And then they're the ones that don't like us, but they're telling us about our history, and we're supposed to believe them. So when they talk about slavery, you have to question, like, are they telling the truth? And they're not, because there's no way that black people would allow themselves to be butchered. The way the abolitionists talk about slavery, there's no way that black people would allow themselves to be butchered in that way. There's no way. There's no way. You think black people would allow themselves and their women to be constantly raped and not burn down the entire system themselves? We were cooking for these people. We were taking care of their children. We were in family photos. We were a huge part of the plantation. You know how much damage we could do to the plantation if we get pissed off? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, their narrative. But this is what goes on. Like, if you believe their nonsense, even though they say it over and over and over and over and over again, it must be true. But it's like, no, it's not. It's not. These people don't like us. They're going to be biased when it comes to everything about us. And notice that because we mixed with them, they're a lot better. That's why we had to get rid of, segregation. Even though segregation was very good for black people, even though they weren't being fair. It was separate, but it was not equal. But black people were doing well under Jim Crow. Yes, we were. Okay? But they were still capable of attacking us anytime they want, like Black Wall Street. That was during separation, right? But they still attacked us because black people had an amazing economy or amazing community, and they didn't like that. You have to understand, when black people have something amazing, that is horrible and that's immoral. So you have to ask yourself, was slavery really as bad as they say it was? Because when black people got out of slavery, they were very skilled. They were very skilled. They were far more skilled on average than Caucasians. That's because of slavery. So and they were jealous of that. They didn't like that, and they started oppressing black people, and then started pushing us in prisons and stuff like that. And then, of course, then they were started separating black people from their homes if we were amongst them. But once we weren't amongst them, then of course, the family is intact, right? But once we came out of segregation, they started separating the family, which is very important. That's why it was stable under slavery, and it was stable under Jim Crow, the family. It's very interesting. They're telling a lot of lies, and you have to realize that they are liars. They are liars. You should listen to what they say, but also find out what they're not saying, and how they're saying certain things, because they just try to trip you up every turn. But black people were the true Hebrews. There's over 400 Black Madonnas throughout Europe, and don't believe the nonsense that it's the soot from the candle over centuries that made it black, because that's absolutely ridiculous. These people are liars, and we have to expose them.